Hi, I'm Shane Sparks with Enrollment Resources. Today I'm talking with Burke Malin, Burke's COO of Gurnick Academy of Medical Arts. Burke's responsible for oversight of campuses, forecasting, budgeting, basically all the things to make the school run smoothly and make sure you meet all the government accreditation compliance standards. He's Burke, you've always struck me as like a professional leader, which I really appreciated. And would you characterize yourself that way?
Well, I would say that I've been a student of leadership and spent a great deal of my career working with leaders of small and medium-sized businesses, trying to help them get the most out of their organizations and their people. So yeah, I've taken a real keen interest in what makes sense and how people perceive you, and yeah, basically, what are some of the highest probabilities of coming across in a way where you can get the most out of your people.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so let's start with this maybe. What makes a good leader?
Well, I think recognizing right at the beginning that it starts with hiring. And while you want to hire talent, you always want to hire talent and bring that talent into your organization, because that's your lifeblood, and you count on those people to contribute at a very high level. But you can't ever forget about the process. You can't forget about how do you get these people to operate in an environment that actually makes sense, that actually allows them to proceed and do what they do with their talent. Because if you only have talent and you only hire talent and you go, just do what you do, whatever it is you do, and that special magic potion that you have rubbed all over yourself, that's what's going to make us successful. Well, it doesn't. It actually can frustrate your talent. And so, number one, I think I would really, you got to focus on the process at the same time as talent. You've got to make sure your talent is a part of the process and a part of improvement of the process. And you got to listen. Like, you really have to listen to what's going on. Not just because people need to be listened to in order to feel, a part of your team and being constructive, etc. But you've got to listen so you can see and hear through the noise of what is this person really trying to bring forward and how does it fit into the overall strategy, because not everyone has that mental picture of the overall strategy. So you have to listen. You have to give people some distance to run with their ideas. Of course, with coaching and with the invisible hand watching the process go on in the background, for sure. But people need to also have that opportunity to operate in their own environment, have their successes, have their failures. It's funny. I can't remember what show it was that I was watching, but you're really going to let them do that? You don't want them to get hurt, do you? Well, yeah, actually, just a little bit, because it has a more meaningful impact in the end. So, yeah,
That's interesting. Okay, so I've got a setup and then another question along those lines. So I've always thought, or we internally at BR had thought about the COO role is really the top line. That's the revenue driver. The COO is the profit protector, the protector of the bottom line. Is that how you guys have viewed things?
Yeah, I will say over the last decade, we've gone into a fairly scientific approach to uh, uh, assessing future strategy, modeling, trying to understand, what are the variables involved and how can we do our what if analysis, and so to a large part, the creation of a lot of those models has fallen to me in the executive leadership team. I don't operate in a vacuum. I always get feedback on the models being put forward, and when they think it's not on target. So yeah, fairly scientific approach, modeling the top line, the expenses, And really, I would say, especially from a school perspective, really taking a portfolio approach to what it is that we offer. And so, you have different um, uh, different services that appeal, that are not at all profit makers, but they actually contribute in other ways in terms of connections to network connections to clinical partners, employer partners. So you have to balance off that with then, okay, what is it we're going to offer, and what are the bottom lines that really make sense, and what are some of the external factors that impact us outside our school, economy and cost of living, and what does our demographic look like in local areas and spheres around our different campuses. And it's quite different. It is very different for each of our geographic areas. One program may play well here, but it doesn't play well over here. So really trying to manage the external variables and build that into your model, but your model has to be pretty specific, and it has to come together. And yes, you need a lot of people throwing rocks at your glass house.
And is that like that model you talk about? That model is kind of driving your planning. Is that something you guys developed internally, or is that something you found elsewhere and kind of imported as a best practice?
So it's a little bit of both. I think starting with best practices that are widely available is where everyone should start. I mean, why recreate the wheel? And also being able to step back and go, um, uh, this is the approach we want to take. And then you have people, well, we've tried that before and it doesn't work here. And you go, well, wait a second. There are best practices for a reason, and people have had success doing it this way. Maybe we're not taking into consideration all of the variables needed in order to be successful. So yeah, that adherence and focusing on the best practice, but then you have to make it your own. Like certainly you have to make it your own. Everything from standard job descriptions and evaluation forms, they have to be really, really tied in and tightly made to fit your organization. Hiring processes and testing have to be really tightly organized for your organization. So the same thing with the planning process. We have a planning process that we go through, and it has evolved greatly over time in terms of small group of contributors, to broadening the group, to how do you make that group actually more productive and bringing their concepts and ideas to the table. And now with closer to 450 people in our organization, you have to take a look at how can people at the management level and the more closer to daily operations, how can they have a say?
How
And
much
and
time? Yeah, how much time do you guys budget for your planning?
I would say there's targeted budgeting for planning that's tied to the budget process, but the budget process can't take place until we've had our strategic process built so that you know how to support your strategic process financially, because there's almost always a financial implication to a strategic process change,
Mhm.
or a direction you're going to go. So it's it might be more defined, getting closer to Q4, looking forward into the next year. But the planning happens all the time. It's this balance of trying to communicate what's going on in real time, adjusting your living, breathing strategy document, which changes because of, say, things like COVID, or other things that get in the way, government regulation, policy, whatever the case might be. So it's I have to characterize our planning as something that happens all year round, and it's about adjusting your base template. That's you can't just stick with something because you came up with a good idea and you're going to drive it home no matter what extraneous things are happening. So yeah,
Okay.
more formal.
So that's organic and kind of picks up speed around budgeting time. So you gotta kind of say, okay, yeah, we're going to commit to this because we'd have to allocate some money there. But
Yes.
And that's at Enrollment Resources this year was a banner year for us because we actually did a proper budget and a strategic plan and a bunch of stuff that made me feel like we're organized. And it's great, feels great, right? Would you say that that represents a competitive advantage for you in some ways? Like if you guys are more solid operators, that um, creates a I don't know, competitive distance between you and others.
Yeah, I know just based on all the leadership I've worked with over the years that there's this thing I call, and I can't remember who came up with the concept. They call it thin slicing. And when you become competent at what you do, and you've had a breadth of experience in making decisions because you go, oh, I've seen this before. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And that didn't come with any analysis whatsoever, except the internal analysis that very quickly happened, reaching into the file cabinet, going, nope, 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 nope. Okay, this is how we're going to do it. And so I find that there's a lot of leaders out there that are super good at thin slicing, taking a little bit of information and making a sweeping directional change or just making a change, and they go forward with it. And I think that the problem with that is that they're right 80% of the time. It's when they're not right that 20% of the time where you go, hey, that whole thin slicing thing didn't quite work for you. How about we go back to something just a little bit more deliberate? And yes, I know it's burdensome because it takes time and energy and input, and you've got to listen to people. But yeah, I think that it is a competitive advantage to have a deliberate strategy process because it forces thinking, it forces scrutiny, it forces feedback from the stakeholders who are in the system. And yeah, I think getting back to your very first question about a leader, you have to demonstrate that you're willing to get into someone else's process and really try to understand it, so that they trust you in this iterative strategy process where they go, yeah, he took time to learn or about my department, and so the feedback and the scrutiny I'm getting is going to be received rather than a big wall like he doesn't know anything. How could he possibly give us any reasonable or important feedback? Because how could he know financial aid or admissions or whatever it might be? So yeah, I think the deliberative process is super important and a competitive advantage when you start talking about formal strategy.
I remember reading once that introverted CEOs tended to be more effective, right? So I noticed this in our company, right? I'm the loudest voice in the room, even though I don't want to be. And I've had to deliberately step back and just say, like, I'll make a suggestion and all of a sudden it's at the top of the list, the to-do list. I'm like, well, I don't want it there. I just was throwing an idea in. And so I'm careful about it now. And so you've got these strong, extroverted, kind of charismatic, the thin slicers, as you said, right? That are, hey, this is the hill we're charging, impatient driver type people, which, hey, often right, but don't include others in the organization and don't kind of lift the skill set of the organization along with them. Is that maybe a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I think the important point coming out is if you don't incorporate people, then they're going to feel that you don't trust them. Okay, you don't want to get to that point where they're just going, yes, boss, whatever you say, boss, I'll do whatever you say. That drives me nuts. It just
Yeah.
drives me nuts. And I go, no, that's not what I'm trying to accomplish here. But yeah, no, it's not a good
Okay.
place.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So just a couple more minutes. So you've got to kind of hunt for opportunities, right? That part of your mandate is where can we get better? What's the problem that we're not seeing yet? How do you do that? Like, what's your mindset around trying to find opportunities for improvement in the school?
So, um, one of the things that has happened over the last number of years Um, and it gets back to a pretty, businessy scientific approach, and trying to really catalog the types of challenges that you're facing on a regular basis, and really taking the time to do that. So when you catalog them, then you start to see patterns. You start to see areas. You start to see the connections between the different departments or different processes that might be getting in your way. And if you can also start to see, is this a pattern that is like campus specific or corporate department specific? What's the frequency of it? Sometimes a challenge is just a one-off. Something was missed, versus a systemic challenge, which is something where you're going, oh, okay, I can see something that's happening over here at this campus. It happens 7 times a week, and here's how and who it's actually impacting. So that is something that we've really tried to strive for, is really trying to understand what is frequency, catalog, the type. Let's get the right people in, and let's use some of our tools that we have. I am such a huge believer in process flow charting, so that you can take a look at a picture of everyone's inputs and let everyone pictorially go, oh, that's the part of the process here that's not working. We get to put our finger on that, either the decision-making diamond, or we get to put our finger on the process itself and start focusing on it. And we found many a backlog, and then subsequently how it was being solved through what I consider expediters running around the organization trying to expedite the process at that point, with ever really trying to fix it, just trying to throw more person power at the problem. So yeah,
interesting. And do you use models you use that? You have like Kaizen, or there's a lot of continuous improvement kind of models that would be part of it. Is yours rooted in any specific philosophy?
I wouldn't say that it's a specific philosophy. Being a graduate of a business school, and we learned about all the different models, but when it comes down to it, it's a again, what is our true flow? What documentation's involved here in this point and this point, and what's the decision making, and where are our logic gates in what we do, and are our people following those? And so I wouldn't say that there is an adherence to a certain type of philosophy or anything like that. It's again, do you want to get down the road of something super complicated, or do you want to get something that works, that's visible, and let's get to the next level as quick as we can? But there are things that I definitely use as natural conventions to talk to people, including swimming lanes. So the process that's up here belongs to admissions, and then the process switches down here to this swimming lane, which is financial aid, and it switches back up here and then gets up to student services and gets to campus ops and the rest of it. But so I definitely use the conventions, but I wouldn't say there's philosophy specific.
Interesting. Okay. What advice would you give to the operator who's trying to grow his or her school?
I've actually found myself talking to a lot of school people, and for that matter, to the other businesses that support our industry. And I don't know why we get on this topic, but we get on this topic a lot. And I think maybe I see this connection more than anything, and that is, think scale at all times. I don't care if you are just starting out, you are a one campus, one program type of school. If you have designs on growing, think scale. Think scalable systems. Think about how you're approaching your programs, everything from how you're designing the program, clock hour, credit hour, how that relates to financial aid, what that's going to look like and impact your system in the future. Again, admissions and people that have to work in that environment. What does that look like if you grow to 5, 6 programs, 2, 3 campuses, and what systems do you have in place? Are you actually building with something that has that ability to expand? And we all know entrepreneurs, they've got a great idea, about a school, and they get in there as an operator, and they're using the heck out of Excel, and that's how their enrollment agreements are separate, but they're super operators doing everything, and they're successful because they're motivated. But you can't be that, and you can't just fill your organization with this super talent, these superheroes. It just doesn't work long term. So all planning, all initial processes, avail yourself of best practices, ask questions of the operators that have had that ability to grow, and try and really like listen to it and learn from it. Again, even if you're a 100 student school, it doesn't matter. Think scalability at all times as it pertains to systems, as it pertains to your management team and how you bring people on board, as it pertains to management and metrics and what you're going to track and how you're going to track it, and ease of use. Like how do you make good people even better? So that's what I
Awesome.
would.
Yeah, super interesting. Burke, listen, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was really interesting. I think it's an important lesson for the operators that I view it as they're kind of trying to migrate from the energy that's required in a force of personality kind of way to run a business to a truly operationalized one where they get the continuous improvement and the growth without one person driving it.
Yeah, that I actually like to talk about our executive level team. You definitely can point out the strong points and where the talent exists, and how it's like a marriage. You don't tend to marry yourself. You tend to marry someone who is a complement to you, and it's much like an executive level too. Unless you've got everyone is like this homogeneous group working together, which I think really limits where you can go and the ideas being generated. So yeah, we've had some very good luck with our team, and where our talent is dispersed and how.
Awesome. Hey, Burke, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane. Good talk.